This podcast is for information purposes only and is not and should not be construed as professional advice or an offer or commitment by any Rabobank group member to enter into a transaction. The views expressed by the presenter and or guests are their own and do not necessarily represent the views of Rabobank. Please see the podcast description for our full disclaimer. Welcome to RaboTalk's Growing Our Future, where we talk to experts from both here in New Zealand and across the world to bring New Zealand farmers and growers the information they need to make informed strategic decisions about the future direction of their business to ensure they continue to thrive in a fast-changing world. Across the country, catchment groups are bringing farmers and communities together to tackle local challenges, improve water quality, and build more resilient farming systems for the future. Through our Catchment Conversation series, we're catching up with people at the heart of these groups to hear their stories, understand what's working on the ground, and share insights that others can learn from. I'm your host, Blake Holgate, and today we're heading to Southland to explore the story of the Makarewa Headwaters Catchment Group. Joining us is someone deeply involved in that journey who brings both personal passion and practical experience to the table and is also a director for both Thriving Southland and Catchment Communities Aotearoa. Alexis Wadworth. Alexis, welcome to the Growing Our Future podcast.
Hi, Blake. Great to be here.
Look, can you start by just letting our listeners know who you are, introducing yourself, your background, and your connection to Southland and the Makarewa catchment?
Yeah, sure. So I am farming alongside my husband and our two young daughters in central Southland in the Hokanui Hills. My background is originally hailing from the mighty Naki, and following that, shifting down to Lincoln, did a BCom Ag there and then moved into a banking career in rural banking just shy of 10 years before getting back to farming full-time.
Yeah, okay. So one of the many migrants from the Naki down to the deep south. Look, how did you get involved with the Makarewa Headwaters Catchment Group?
Yeah, great question. So the conversation started early on in the piece through a local discussion group that my husband was involved with. And alongside that, with my rural professional hat on, had been involved in some conversations around the fringes of catchment groups in the early days. So a culmination of the two of them, really. And then in May 2019, our catchment group started to get quite serious about actually formalising a catchment group in our community. And so the conversation started from there, really.
And so what were the initial drivers or, concerns back in 2019 that really, what was the impetus for the group, I suppose?
Yeah, if you cast your mind back to 2019 in Southland, there was a time where farmers were under quite significant pressures, particularly around improving our waterway qualities across the region, really. That alongside winter grazing practices, there was a lot of noise in this space, and the regulations were also coming down on us quite significantly at that time. And so there was a lot of work really being put on farmers to try and, prove that we're doing the right thing or improve if we weren't. And so that conversation kind of got the locals talking, and we decided that the right thing would be to bandy together and educate each other and ourselves in this space through a catchment group format.
And how was the group sort of structured to start with? What did day one and ground zero look like to start the group and start building that community around the group?
Yeah, we're pretty lucky here. We've got an amazing community and a whole lot of legends in our community that understand if we bandy together, things actually get done. And so the initial conversations had started pre-2019, but I guess the first formal conversations were led by my now co-chair, Mark Thompson, amongst another group of avid supporters of the catchment group space. And thanks to the support of Thriving Southland, we had a pretty meaty brainstorming session, deciding on what our key objectives and goals for the group would be and what our key areas of focus would be. And at the end of the day, it came down to having a waterway that we're proud of and water quality that we're proud to go into the Makarewa, and improving that for generations to come, allowing us to have a swimmable, drinkable water source.
And what was the level of engagement like initially from both farmers and the wider community in the catchment?
Yeah, good. And it only grew as we kind of became a little bit more established and started to nail down our key focus areas. So we probably had an initial group of about a dozen that were really keen to get this going, and it's grown from there. And some of the projects that we've done have had more engagement than others, and it's just the nature of the key focus really, and us also maturing into understanding what our community wants from this space.
Were there any particular challenges for your catchment? You sort of outlined that the general motivations and drivers and objectives, but within your catchment, what did you identify as those focus areas that you really needed to target?
Yeah, definitely water quality, and having an area, an economic and environmental outcomes that we could be proud of, but also the community focus. We really wanted to have community spaces and areas that kind of kept that community together and set us up for the future generations. We had at the time, there was probably changing in some of those generational farming operations as well. So that added another layer of, some different perspectives alongside that regulatory space and helping, I guess, clear some of the muddy waters in that area.
And were there any, particular hurdles or challenges to start with, whether that was around, social, financial, practical? Were there any sort of initial barriers that you really had to knock down before you could build some momentum?
Yeah, we were really lucky with Thriving Southland, and I think that we came in at a time where we could be well supported from Thriving from the outset, and that was a huge boost for us because we had the lovely Sarah Thorne in the background. She's our catchment coordinator through Thriving, and she was able to help us with a lot of that administrative burden and also identifying opportunities around funding and expertise and bringing those people on board to have conversations with us to help build some momentum and speak to the areas of focus that we initially were thinking we wanted to look into.
Yeah, so more broadly, you see that support system, access to funding, knowledge, et cetera, as pretty fundamental to, setting catchment groups up to succeed?
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, you're asking a group of volunteer farmers who probably are the same people who are the volunteers in the sports clubs and the schools and the hall committees and whatever else to take on additional work in a new space. And so having that support in the back from the likes of Thriving is a huge boost to just kind of continuing the momentum without distracting with the noise of the doing, if you like. And I think that is a huge barrier for any community organisation across our industry. We all know that we're busy enough doing our own farming business and running our families and households alongside every other hat that we wear. So absolutely fundamental.
And you mentioned part of your objectives was, broader community, well, I suppose, engagement, but also benefit. You want to provide a benefit to the wider community. What level of engagement have you had from those wider community groups outside farmers and industry groups themselves?
Yeah, and again, it probably depends on the focus of the catchment group at the time. So some of the early works we did around the water quality and the science, probably less engaging for those that aren't hands-on farming themselves. And then some of the other work we've done around some of the pest control impact and understanding the impacts of that, we've had more engagement from outside communities. Our catchment group is quite unique in that we have significant farming area and very small urban influence. We've only got the small town of Browns as part of our catchment. And so a lot of them have immediate direct ties to the industry themselves. So, yeah, that piece alongside, obviously, when we're talking about pest control, we bring in the hunting community and things as well, which is great. But yeah, I think it definitely depends on the focus of the group at the time to what the engagement is. And it could be just that core group of 12. It could be a core group of 40, 50 farmers, or it could expand to 100 plus people, depending on what we're talking about.
Yeah, so that nature of engagement's obviously going to be unique for each catchment, but also what I'm hearing, it's actually topics and issues itself are probably going to drive varying levels of engagement depending on what the focus is at the time.
Yeah, definitely.
What progress has the group made over the last 7 years now? Are there any kind of key successful initiatives, projects, or outcomes that you want to highlight?
Yeah, sure. So we've matured a lot in our thinking and also understanding of what gets people in our community excited. So we initially started off with a lot of the science work around water quality and understanding nutrient loss and runoff risks and possible mitigations, which was great and built an awesome foundation. So we did that through our Lucy Ag project. Alongside that, we've had great success running a lot of community engagement projects and just one-off events. So through the COVID times, we had initiatives where we asked everybody to walk the length of their sort of roadside and pick up rubbish. We had virtual competitions through that. And that's continued on every other year since then, as well as we've also been working on. We've got a community nursery up and running, and we're looking at we're working on a community planting space with a picnic table and it's well situated for a swimming area off the side of one of our local roads. And then from our more science-based work around the water quality testing, we pretty quickly identified a key risk for us, and something we weren't quite very as proud of was the quality of the water coming out of the native bush and also the state of the native bush. And that made us turn our heads to focus on the impact of deer and pigs in particular in our catchment. And that has been our key focus probably alongside that community stuff since 2023. So yeah, that's a huge piece of work that our catchment has done and is continuing to do.
Yeah, not just unique to your catchment, understandably. So it's interesting. So the catchment group itself is kind of, as you said, matured but morphed over time. It's sort of an ongoing process rather than a topic-specific process where you address it and kind of we can move on and tick the box.
Yeah, it is.
What's been your biggest learnings, for you personally through your experience and involvement with the catchment group?
One key area, and this really did influence how we formatted our latest project, is around the more we look into something to answer a question, probably the more questions we have and the more things are left unanswered. That alongside, as we know, the industry is moving at a really rapid pace in a whole lot of areas and research and findings. And so often we start a project with a set outcome in mind, and as we work through that project, we realise that outcome is totally different to what we initially started at. So that's been a really key learning, and just being okay with the fact that we're not going to answer all the questions probably at the end, but actually perhaps adding on another phase of a project to answer those questions is the better way to do it. That and appreciating that people's wheels get spun by different aspects. So whether that's financial, whether that's environmental, whether that's social, having a taste of all of those aspects in some of the project spaces that we're doing alongside that community work is really important for catchment groups, or it certainly is in our case.
Yeah, and as you say, like being adaptive and flexible seems to be pretty important to the ongoing success. What does success look like for your catchment group in the next 5 to 10 years' time?
We can either answer that question two ways. One is around the actual catchment group themselves and the community that surrounds that catchment group. And I would say still having an engaged community in the catchment space would be successful if we were still, driving to improve what was already here, and continue that momentum and influence our surrounding farmers and community in that space to be better than we were yesterday. That would definitely be a success in my eyes. And then in terms of our projects that we've got underway at the moment, particularly the wild pest pressures, having that a little bit more under control, shall we say? Yeah.
So that's the specific priority in the immediate term for the catchment group is that pest control work?
Yes. Yeah.
Any insights or learnings you've found in that space? Because as I mentioned, that will not be unique across the country, and I'd probably get the sense that is going to be a number of catchment groups that start moving towards that being one of, if not the top priority for the group. So anything you can share in that space from your guys' experience?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so in 2023, we launched our Makarewa Headwaters Revival Project, and we set out with this broken into 3 phases. The first phase being understanding the problem, and then with the initial idea that the following phases would be to control the problem and then sort of understand what a controlled number of pests in our catchment group did as a positive impact into our catchment. So we had some huge findings around that first phase, which we finished in 2023, and we are now in the thick of understanding what phase 2 looks like and how we can best work that. So just to give you a bit of a feel for our catchment, so our catchment covers 42,000 hectares. We've got 146 farms through our catchment, and that spans a variety of industries, including dairy, sheep and beef, deer, some mixed cropping, forestry, of course, and a few lifestyle blocks, and then some urban owners as well. What we started to understand as a community was that the impact of deer and pigs on our native bush in particular, but also our farmland, was having some significant environmental and financial impacts. And we really wanted to dig into exactly what those impacts were, and how we best control them to try and get ahead of the game, without having to impose the use of poisons or some other drastic measures to get on top of it. And so, yeah, quite the undertaking. The first phase we broke into 4 different aspects. The first was to survey the farmers and understand what they were seeing, what numbers they were already controlling themselves, and what impact they thought it had. We also employed Trap and Trigger. They came in and did a thermal imaging survey for us to understand just how many pests exist in our catchment. And then from those numbers, we had Victoria Bishop from Lumen come in and look at the economic impacts to our catchment. And we also had Wildlands come in and do an ecological survey and to understand the state of our native bush. So yeah, quite an interesting project, a big piece of work, and the ability to split the project into those different elements created a really engaging conversation for people who, they might be drawn by the economic side of it, but then got really interested in the environmental impacts and vice versa. So yeah, an interesting piece of work for sure.
And was there any key, interesting, surprising takeaways from the environmental and economic impacts that pests were having?
Yeah, I don't know if it was a surprise or just thought it was bad, didn't realise it was quite that bad kind of moment. So from the survey, we know that there was over 7,500 animals identified in living in our catchment. So I should say of the 42,000 hectares of our catchment, we surveyed via the chopper about 30,000 hectares, and that was just because obviously we knew we weren't going to get too many detected down on the flats. 71% of the wild ungulates identified were deer, and then the balance being primarily pigs. And we also have Hokanui merino living in our catchment. But we decided to leave them alone, although we did build them into our financials. The cost to our catchment was identified at over $2 million, and that takes into account the feed consumed. If you think about lost winter crop, that's a huge cost to landowners. If you think about the wild pigs rooting up pasture, the weed impact that then comes, as well as the regrassing cost, and then just their daily grazing habits. So they're not always in the native bush, they're coming out and grazing grasslands. We also included a greenhouse gas cost because we think back to 2023, that was pretty relevant at the time. So that brought us to our $2 million. And we know that the feed consumed equated to this catchment carrying an additional 5,000 ewes. So pretty significant when you think about the burden on the farmland and within the native bush. From an ecological point of view, sadly not surprising, there was a lot of native bush that was identified to be at tipping point. The palatability scale that Wildlands prepared for us highlighted that some plant species that are pretty low down on the palatability scale were also scarce. So we know that the deer in particular are going for, the really yummy stuff isn't there anymore, and they're now basically just decimating the forest floor in our native bush. Yeah, so pretty sad, really.
Yeah, on both counts. And just to clarify, so that $2 million was an annual cost?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what are the steps to address it? Where are you guys at now, and how do you go about starting to attack that problem?
Great question. So what we did know that first of all, the landowners were already doing a great job trying to control the numbers on their own properties. But what the survey identified that was the numbers that the farmers were removing through both themselves and their own trapping and hunting, as well as having external hunters coming in. The numbers that were being taken off by individual farms was not equating to the level of natural increase. So we're already beyond that and starting to see that snowball, I guess. The work that has ramped up since, we've had choppers come in, particularly in the venison space, and they are harvesting the venison and taking that for human consumption. And there's also a really good improvement in landowners' understanding and how they're educating their hunters around not just going out to get the trophy stag, but actually helping us to control this pest problem. The people that have been involved in hunting this catchment know that it's no longer a task to go hunting here. It's a look and see expedition, really. So, just improving knowledge in this space, and equally the majority of farmers who perhaps didn't have as much of a hunting, or weren't doing as much hunting on their own properties, have improved that and are either getting commercial hunters in or are opening their gates to recreational hunters in a bigger way than they were before. That's definitely helped in that space. And moving forward, the biggest question we've got now is, so what level do we need to get these pests to allow our native bush to regenerate? So we're really fortunate. We've had some funding to establish 10 exclusion plots through our bush across the catchment. And they are being established in different areas of our native bush. So some of our mature podocarp through to some of our younger regenerating bush areas and in different parts of the catchment. And what that's going to help us do is identify if all the ungulates were removed from an area, how long will it take for us to start seeing some of this native bush regenerate and improve our forest floor? We know that there's some, especially in the regenerating bush, there are a good seed source, but the poor little seeds aren't getting much of a chance. They'll get up above the ground and be nipped off pretty well straight away. So that's a really exciting piece of work. Yes, it is more science and it's not doing a big hit on the numbers, but to do a big hit on the numbers requires a little bit more both funding and also coordination of individual landowners and the hunting community as well.
And do you guys have any support of external agencies, government agencies? That's a lot for a catchment and group of farmers to take on and group of hunters to take on, right? What does external support look like?
Yeah, and we've had some awesome conversations with the appropriate agencies early on in the piece. They're also obviously at a state where you sort of go, well, how long's a piece of string? How much money do we throw at this? But in terms of knowledge, we've been really lucky. We've got some amazing contacts, and particularly when we were in the throes of presenting our phase 1 findings, we had some incredible engagement from across the country, and lots of tips and tricks. Like we've had engagement from as far away as Australia, and lots of people have got some great ideas, and they've had lived experience, whether it be the best way to trap pigs or whatever. So we've been trialing a lot of different ways. We've got some individual landowners that are building deer traps as well. So a lot of thought has been going into this. The trouble we have is our landscape varies so much. So while the Aotearoa side of the Makarewa Headwaters, the higher parts of that we can easily access with a chopper. Unfortunately, the poor guys down over in the Laura Gorge get a lot of the flow on because the deer run for cover and the canopy is such that we can't infiltrate that with a chopper as well. So that's just the deer, and then the pigs is another kettle of fish altogether.
Yeah, but what I'm hearing is, that groundwork that you guys did as a catchment to understand the nature and scope of the problem has really unlocked a lot of opportunities to how you're going to address it going forward. You may not have all the answers yet, but it sounds like a great function of the catchment group to collate that information and get it to a point now you've got options. You can, and it's a lot easier to engage with those other parties if you've got hard numbers and facts and details around what you're talking about, rather than sort of a generic, hey, we've got a problem, what can you do for us?
Yeah, and I'll be the first to say that was a really interesting conversation from the outset, because as you can imagine, as a group of farmers, we like doing the doing, and to sit back and go, hang on, but now we need to study this, took a lot of convincing. But you're dead right that having this well-presented packaged report has been an absolute game changer in unlocking some of these conversations.
Excellent. Well, good luck to you and the catchment on getting on top of that and continuing the other good work you're doing. Speaking of other good work you're doing, so you're a director on Catchment Communities Aotearoa. How long have you been in that role for, Alexis?
So this will be coming up my first year. I stepped on at the AGM in 2025.
So what role do you see for catchment groups, across New Zealand? What role can or should they have?
Yeah, I've been really lucky through my director role with Thriving Southland to get a bit of a view around the variety of catchment groups that exist, and that's just in one region, and understanding that is mirrored across the country with different catchment groups having different areas of focus. And I think that's a really integral reason behind catchment groups existing. Every pocket of the country is going to have a different area of concern or area that the community wants to focus in. So while some don't want to be involved in the regulatory space, I completely understand that. Others do. And likewise with whether they want to have more of a science focus or whether they want to have more of a community focus. We've got a real opportunity with this ground-up approach for our communities in the rural settings to really drive what our environmental impact of the industry looks like in the future. And that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, so what would be, your advice to farmers or growers who are kind of thinking about getting involved, but are unsure, maybe a bit hesitant, so, have heard about it, not anti it, but also don't know if they've quite got the time, I suppose, and bandwidth to get involved. Any key messages?
Yeah, totally understand that, first of all. The other piece is, I guess, if you're having reservations, what are the reasons for your reservations? And perhaps if there is an existing catchment group underway there, perhaps you sharing those insights for what your reservations are could really help shape what that catchment group chooses to focus on. So that's a key piece around the community drive. If we know what each community feels comfortable looking into and educating themselves in a certain space, what is that space? And how can we all understand what is a good fit for our local community? The farmers can be as involved as much or as little as they want, but just being there to support and using it, seeing it as a tool to upskill and improve the performance of your own property is, at the very least, something that you'll get out of that.
I think it's a really good point, though, you make around if you've got a hesitation, that could be the value you bring to the table, right? To present maybe an eco chamber occurring within a catchment group with a agenda driven by certain elements or sector or individuals. It's actually perhaps it's the stuff that's holding you back is actually what the catchment group needs to hear. Yeah,
absolutely. And that ground up approach is, while progress won't always be linear when you've got a room full of farmers and community members, what the insights will be gained along the way through that journey is just as valuable as if you had somebody external coming in and facilitating a project or an area of focus, in my opinion. Yes, it might take a little bit longer when it's ground up and driven by farmers, but yeah, the insights and knowledge that'll be gained and shared along the way, if it ends up being a conversation around a barbecue in summer because of something that was discussed 6 months ago, that's a huge win, right?
Absolutely. If our listeners were going to remember one thing from our interview and discussion today, Alexis, what would you want that to be?
Just get involved, start the conversation wherever your particular area is on the catchment group journey. It's okay. The ability to turn corners and adjust the journey that you're going on is only yours to do. It's ground up driven, like we've been saying, and what insights can be gained through that journey is just as exciting as the end game, in my opinion. So, yeah, if I can say one thing, just for the existing catchment groups, be open to listening to what your community is saying, and for those that aren't yet involved, don't be afraid to speak up and share your insights.
Seems a pretty good place to leave it. Hey, Alexis, thank you very much for joining me today, and thanks for all the work that you and the community and farmers are doing in Southland, and more generally the work you're doing through Thriving Southland and catchment communities at Aotearoa. Really enjoyed the discussion. I think some really good insights around the evolution of catchment groups and some specific ones about the pest control work you're doing there. So look forward to seeing how that plays out going forward.
Awesome. Thanks, Blake. Great to chat.
Thank you for listening to RaboTalk's Growing Our Future podcast. If you're interested in learning more about how Rabobank can support you to succeed into the future, please go to rabobank.co.nz.